Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. We'll be recording this. We'll be sending this through afterwards as well. This is the live demo for LinkedIn RSC for Bullhorn for Salesforce, Connectus, and Job Science. Can we just have the next slide, Jordan? Thank you. So just by way of introduction, my name is Greta Redsnick. I'm a product marketing manager here at Bullhorn. I handle the Salesforce portfolio, so the 3 products I've just mentioned, and I've been at Bullhorn about 10 months now, which I think, Jord, is about the same as you.
Correct, yes, I've been with Bullhorn pretty much as long as you have. I joined as a product manager for the Connectus product, and in addition to that, I worked on the LinkedIn RSC integration across our whole Salesforce product portfolio. So in that sense, I'm here to give you a nice demo of that today.
Awesome, thank you for that. So just in terms of agenda and housekeeping, we'll have a really quick intro, just a couple of slides, no death by PowerPoint, I promise. Then we're going to go into a live demo, and then we'll just touch base on the enablement process, and then we'll have quite a large Q&A at the end. So I've just started getting through your questions here. And I see you're all over. Hello, Cleveland. Hello, Austin. Hello, Texas. Hello, Houston. Hi, everyone. Please feel free to just use the same question box, and then we'll be doing the Q&A after the demo. So LinkedIn RSC is the proprietary connector between Bullhorn Salesforce products and LinkedIn. Stands for Recruiter System Connect, as I mentioned. It has a couple of features that we'd like to show you today. First and foremost, the integration is a window into LinkedIn from Salesforce. So you can see on the candidate record a real-time view into someone's LinkedIn profile, which is really handy if some of your data is out of date. So you can see whether somebody's, for example, changed jobs or cities. On the LinkedIn side, you'll also see if a LinkedIn profile is already in Bullhorn, which is great. You have a past applicant spotlight on your search within LinkedIn if, for example, you'd like to find candidates that you've already been interacting with in the past. And then you have a sync between your LinkedIn notes and emails. So your emails are saved in Salesforce as notes, which is great for collaboration, obviously, and having a view over your whole org. And then you have a one-click export. So this is a way to submit a LinkedIn profile as a candidate for a job without leaving LinkedIn. And just a couple of things in terms of how you can get the integration. So the integration is available now. It is free, but you need to have LinkedIn Recruiter licenses. It is available to current and new customers. And this is a really important point. If you're interested in the integration, please get in contact with your account manager. They will send you information on the integration, and then they will ask you to sign an addendum to the contract. So this is going to be the first step before we can go forward with that. It's an important one. Another important thing to mention is that you'll need to do some configuration work on your own. We estimate that it's somewhere around 2 to 4 hours, but it absolutely depends on the experience of the person doing it. So please do keep that in mind. So we have a host of documentation around the integration, FAQs, a guide, a feature list that your account manager can send to you. So please ask them for that before you sign any addendums or kind of go forward with it. There's a lot of information that you can look at. And just a couple of other points, not all versions of the 3 platforms are compatible with the integration. So once you get in contact with us, one of the things that support can ask you to do or do for you is to move you to a compatible version. So basically to upgrade. So you see here on the screen the versions that are compatible with LinkedIn RSC. And we had about 170 registrations for this session today, and quite a large portion are online today. So we might have quite a bit of interest in people asking us to switch the integration on. So there might be a bit of a lag. As always, it is first come, first serves. But just to keep kind of expectations managed, let's say, there might be a bit of a lag. But another point is that if you don't want to do the configuration on your own, or if you cannot for some reason, then we do have as trusted SI partners who could do that for you. And if you're interested in having an SI do the configuration work for you, then you could just let your account manager know, and they will put you in contact with the right partner based on region and based on product. So I think, Jord, you're up.
Yeah, so let's take a look into what the integration actually is. Before I start with the actual demo, I'd like to give you two disclaimers before we really get into it. The first one is the LinkedIn RC integration is part of our shared development roadmap across our 3 products. I'm only going to demo the integration in Bullhorn for Salesforce, and that is because it's literally the same experience across 3 products, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to go through each one of them. And the RC integration is basically a separate package that is available as the exact same thing across the 3 ones. In addition to that, we will also be demoing from LinkedIn's side, but from their new UI. You may already be working in that new UI. They're working on the rollout as we speak, but your LinkedIn Recruiter UI might look a little different to what you're going to be seeing today, but you'll be getting there soon anyways. So let's get into it, and let's start from the Salesforce side. So I've got my profile right here, and there's a couple of things that you'll immediately notice that are different. So this candidate, which is me, is now synced between the ATS, between Salesforce, and with my LinkedIn account. So when that happens, you can see there is a couple of things that are enabled on the Salesforce side. First and foremost, we get this LinkedIn candidate profile widget, which basically is a window into my LinkedIn account. So you can see my summary, my activities, my experience, education, and all that. You basically get a view into what you would see in Recruiter as well. This is probably the most important part of the integration, but it is important to keep in mind that it is a window. So we're not actually pulling this data from LinkedIn into Salesforce. So if I were to search on anything that I see here, if I don't also have that data in Salesforce, you won't find me. But it does allow you to get a very good view and get a more complete candidate profile. Now, in addition to the candidate profile, there is 2 other things that are being synced and that data is being shared, and that is the emails and the prospect notes. So you may be familiar with LinkedIn's email system. It basically allows you to send and receive messages to and from candidates. And all those messages done from Recruiter will sync over to your Salesforce instance. The same thing happens for prospect notes. We'll show the LinkedIn side of these as well. But basically, the little notes you can make on a candidate profile are also synced over. So this is actual Salesforce data. This is not a window. This is something you can play around with, build customizations on, etc. Now, in order to enable this, there is a couple of important items. So first and foremost, the email address is a critical piece towards making this integration work. The email address of the candidate is used to basically map a LinkedIn candidate with a Salesforce candidate. So that also means that if you do not have an email, or if the candidate in a rare situation would send you a different email than that used for LinkedIn, the integration will be hampered and not be fully operational. In addition to the email, some of you have GDPR to be considering. I do not have it enabled right now, but you can see here this field, LinkedIn consent. For GDPR areas, it means you need to get consent to enable the sync from Salesforce to LinkedIn. So if you want this to work, you will need to fetch consent. How we've seen customers already do it is that they make it a part of their privacy policy, and they register the date that someone accepted their privacy policy. And if that date is later than that they added the LinkedIn sync piece, they will automatically enable this checkbox. And once it's enabled, the integration takes care of itself, and it finds the candidates that have provided consent and will only sync those. Next up is we'll take a look at the LinkedIn side of things. So let's assume I'm here again on my own candidate profile, but let's assume this person doesn't yet exist in our ATS and we want to get them there. Now, the old way that we jokingly call the Chinese interface would be to manually create a candidate and manually make them in the ATS, which is probably what quite a few you do right now. But with this integration, we have two new ways to get this candidate profile synced into your Salesforce org. The first one is the one-click export that Greta just mentioned. You'll find it right here with the export to ATS button. You can search for a job. Let's say that we think this person would be interesting for a role as an account manager, and I can click on export. What this will do, it will create a candidate profile, just like the one we have here, within Salesforce, and it will also create a job application for that account manager. This is one of the two ways. The alternative is to send the candidate an email. I would say, you could send the candidate an email message as you normally would. And now what happens, the candidate will receive the email message, and once they open it, they get a little pop-up window that will look will look exactly like this, where they can choose to share their email address and their phone number. If you click on yes, please share, then it will create the candidate and it will add these details. So that's also what the difference is between the one-click export and the in-mail stop profile. So if I use the one-click export, it will not give me email address and it will not give me a phone number. It will just give me first name, last name, and a couple of things like their title or their current position, but it will not provide me contact details. And it requires me to select a job as well. If I, however, use the in-mail way, I get a little bit more. I get contact details. I do not necessarily need to have a job application there. It could be a more generic message. But the downside is you have to wait until the candidate consents, and if they don't, you don't get it. Additionally, there's two important things to note specifically with regards to the one-click export. Candidates can opt out of it. So then this button, if you click on export to ATS, it will say the candidate does not want this, and you will not be able to use the one-click export. Because of these limitations, some customers have requested the disabling of this feature in general, where they're like, we don't want to use that as all, we just want to use in-mails. And I can tell you now that LinkedIn is working on making that possible in the very near future, so that you can choose to either use the one-click export within your company or not at all. So there's one more feature that Greta already mentioned, which is the past applicant spotlight. As you can see here in my recruiter search screen, I have this new spotlight called past applicants. If I were to click on this, I will get a view of candidates as I normally would, but this will only be candidates who have an existing job application within your ATS. I'm not actually going to click on it right now because that will show up a bunch of people who have not consented to being part of this webinar, but it basically works like you would do any other search. You'll get a list of candidates, but it will only be candidates that have a job application within your system. When it comes to the integration, these are the core features that are offered. So we have a bidirectional sync that allows you to sync candidates, and it can be candidates that originate from your Salesforce side or from your LinkedIn side. The Salesforce side, it happens automatically. It's a sync that happens between 5 to 60 minutes, depending on your configuration. And it will just sync the candidates that have an email address and that have consent if you are in a GDPR area. On the other end, we have some new options on the LinkedIn side where we can export candidates or send them emails and have them automatically exported into the system as well. So we have a lot of opportunities there. And you'll see that we have some sharing of data. So you can see applications on the LinkedIn side. You can see a direct link to their ATS profile, stuff like that. And the same thing happens on the Salesforce side, where we get some data from LinkedIn to show a profile, to show emails, etc. So in essence, that's the integration as it exists. I'll now go over a bit about the enablement process. So how do you go from where you are right now to having this integration active in your org? It all starts with getting in contact with your account manager. They can help you get started. They can provide you some documentation if you need more information. And after that, it comes down to signing the addendum. Once the addendum is signed, we will take care of the installation. So we are going to install the package on your desired org and make sure that it's there. And that will be done by our support department, who will also share the rest of the configuration documentation with you, which walks you step by step. That's also the next step, and that's the step that is owned by yourselves, which is the configuration involved with this integration. So any moderately experienced Salesforce admin will be able to walk through this quite easily. It's a step-by-step guide that explains what you need to do. So you need to set up some custom fields if you don't already have them. You need to set up a site. You need to configure consent if you're in a GDPR area. You need to set up the layout so that you get the candidate profile where you want it. And you need to do some mapping where you say, okay, these are my fields on Salesforce, and I want to map them to these fields on LinkedIn. And it also comes down to what you're already using. You may already have some fields that you use for this. You may, for example, have a job description field that you want to use instead of the default job description field, so you can map that to your liking. For this configuration piece, you can either do it yourself, get an SI partner. If you get stuck, of course, a support organization is fully capable of figuring out your issues, helping you resolve them. But the configuration side is something you'll take care of. After the configuration, there is the enabling of the integration, which is just a couple of steps where you basically authenticate between LinkedIn and Salesforce so that the connection is up and running. You'll need a recruiter admin to do that. So your internal admin for a LinkedIn recruiter. After that, you activate the sync. You can schedule it, like I said, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 60 minutes. Also depends on how much data you're working with, whether 5 minutes will work. And if you made any mistakes in the configuration or anywhere before, the sync page will basically show you what needs to be fixed before it can activate. In this step, you will also retrieve the seat holders, which is basically assigning your Salesforce users to which have a seat and which do not have a seat. Last but not least, a quick sanity check, and you can start to roll out. You can choose to start with a smaller group by only making the LinkedIn widgets available to smaller groups and roll it out on another roll it out one by one, or you can just make it available for your whole user base at once. So a couple of obstacles. You need to make sure that you're on compatible versions. You need to go through the configuration. You might get stuck somewhere, but our support organization is fully able to help you out with that. So that shouldn't be a big issue. There's a couple of things that are upcoming that we're still working on. So we're working currently on multi-contract support. So within LinkedIn Recruiter, you might have multiple contracts with all their own groups of users belonging to a specific contract, just like you might have multiple Salesforce orgs within your organization. You might have multiple LinkedIn contracts. Currently, the integration only allows you to connect to one contract of LinkedIn, but we're in a very near future going to release a new version that will support multi-contract, which means you can have one org connected to multiple LinkedIn Recruiter contracts. In addition to that, we're working on a feature that will allow you to manually assign seat holders. Currently, seat holders, so the users within Salesforce who also have a LinkedIn seat, they're automatically assigned based on email, but depending on some privacy settings, we may not always get those emails and not be able to automatically assign the seat holders correctly. So we're working on a feature that will allow you to manually take care of those couple of users that won't be automatically assigned. And we are, of course, constantly working on customers who are experiencing specific issues and helping them resolve it. During the Q&A, we'll not go into specific issues. If you're already somewhere in this process, we'll keep it on the generic questions. because if you're already working on this, you may already have cases with support and they're already working on it. In that case, I think it's time to get into some Q&A. So we have even a bit more time than we anticipated, but I imagine there will be plenty of questions.
Sure, a question from my side then. Does a user need to test in their sandbox first, or can they go straight to production?
They can move straight through production. The product is definitely production ready. I would even recommend it, because if you go to a sandbox, the problem is, for instance, when we were talking about the in-mail stub profiles, if you're fetching that data, you're fetching production data into your sandbox, which has all kinds of problems. In addition, once you want to move from sandbox to production, it's not a very big deal, but there's a couple of extra steps involved by first disabling it on sandbox and then enabling it on production. So a couple more steps involved. I would generally recommend going straight through production. And if you want to have a smaller user group tested first, you can definitely do that by setting up your profiles in a way that normal users cannot see the new widgets and the new data, and your test group can.
Awesome, thanks for that. Let's dive into the Q&A.
Yes. I am not seeing any questions yet. Is that correct, Greta?
You need to open the questions panel, or I can read them out to you if you would like.
Yeah, if you could, because I have the panel open, but I don't.
Of course. So the first question is from Sophie. When you say you can see if a candidate has changed jobs or cities, is this highlighted, or does the consultant need to compare with the record in Bullhorn?
So if they change cities, no, you will not see that automatically. You will simply, because of the syncing of data, it looks a little ugly in here. You can definitely present that nicer than I did it right here, but you can definitely see that. But if you really want to get updates, if something changed, yeah, you will have your consultant configure a flow, a process, whatever to make that work. Yes.
Great, thank you. Then the next question from Sean: what is the minimum number of active LinkedIn recruiter licenses needed to enable the integration with job signs?
Theoretically, you just need one recruiter license to make it work. You do need to keep in mind, I'll show you that for a little bit. For instance, this LinkedIn candidate profile that you see here will only work for that person who is logged into LinkedIn Recruiter. So if you only have that one user, he will be the only one who is able to use this. The prospect notes and in-mails will sync for everyone, but like a large piece of the functionality will then only work for your limited user. And yeah, it comes with the standard LinkedIn Recruiter license. They have a page where they explain what license comes with what features, and RSC is in most, if not all of them.
Great, thank you. Then we have a question from Nancy. We have many of these features, she says, by using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but this won't work with this license. I think that is correct. You specifically need a recruiter license in order for this integration to work.
Correct, yes.
We have a question from Sarah. How can I check which versions of Talent Rover I am on?
Oh, that is quite easy. If you go to Salesforce Setup, I'll just present it right away. And you search for install packages. Takes a little to load, apparently. And you can see right here that we are on 5.19. So it will show right here in the version number column.
Perfect. I learned that today as well. Thank you. A question from Chris. Can you manually make a connection between the LinkedIn profile and the Bullhorn record if the emails don't match?
Yes, there is a way to do that. There is even a way, like if it for some reason would be matching with the wrong profile, to unlink it. You can see that right here, and then you'll see profile options, and it will then match on the data that it does have available, so that you can manually select, okay, it's this person to establish that connection.
Great, I hope we answered that question.
There you see.
A question from Sarah. Are past applicants just ones that I have identified, or anyone that any of my colleagues have also added?
The latter. It will definitely, so for all the candidates, let me rephrase that. All the candidates that are synced, so all the candidates in your Salesforce org that meet the criteria, which means that they have an email address that matches, and whether you're in GDPR, have provided consent, that data will go to LinkedIn. And basically all the candidates in your Salesforce org that are synced and that have a job application, those will come up in the past applicant spotlight.
Thank you. Question from Sophie. Can we do a mass sync from Bullhorn to LinkedIn before launching so existing database is synced?
Yeah, but basically the sync takes care of that by itself. Once you enable it, it will go through it, go through all the records. But again, they do need to meet the criteria. So I don't know if you're in a GDPR area, if none of them have consent checked, it will not sync anything. If they do have consent checked, we have a job that's running in the background in this org, for instance, every 5 minutes, and it will just go through it until it's all done.
Cool. Question from Sarah. What stage do they join the ATS when you do enable one-click export to ATS?
What stage do they? That's actually configurable to a degree, at least when it comes to the record type, but I think the stage is a little different, and I think that's a more product-specific question. Let me write that one down and come back on that, because I'm not entirely sure, but I'm fairly certain that it's configurable in a way that you can recognize the candidates who come from LinkedIn and make your own processes to set them to wherever you want them to go to.
Sarah will be in touch directly. All right, the next question that I have here is from Sophie. When in-mailing a candidate within LinkedIn, what happens if a candidate accepts the in-mail but does not consent to sharing details? Does this stay only within LinkedIn?
Yes, it's a good question. So the candidate, if they receive that email, they get two questions. First, they get, "Are you interested?" which is what you probably already know about, that candidates can click yes or no. That stays on LinkedIn. We don't get that even to here. This pop-up is the second question, and if they click on no here, you don't get anything to Salesforce. You keep everything in LinkedIn.
Very much in protection of online privacy.
Absolutely.
A question from Sean here, which I think is a great question, Sean, and might be almost a feature request. Can you map LinkedIn notes to another object rather than prospect notes, or even map it to log a call or new task under the activity section?
That is a very good question. I have to say it has not been tried yet. I know the configuration setup, and I'm inclined to say that it is possible because you can configure it to some degree. The prospect notes, however, are part of the object that is. Sorry, I'm thinking a little out loud here because it's definitely a new question.
I think this is one that we might take offline.
No, yeah, definitely we'll take it offline and come back to it. I think right now the answer is no, that it is not possible because the object is part of the separate package. And I am fairly confident in saying that that object is not configurable. So what we have, now that I recall, we did see one other customer do is that they made a process that they wanted kind of the same thing. So they wanted, when an email or a prospect note happened, they wanted that to become an activity. So they built a process to take care of that for them. So at the moment, I'm inclined to say no, but we can definitely follow up on that.
Cool, thank you. Question from Samira here. Do we need a recruiter seat for each Salesforce user?
No, definitely not. Just keep in mind that those who do not have a seat, they will not see this window that I have open right here. They will see you need to be logged in. So they will need to see a login window, or you can choose with profiles so that they don't see the widget at all. But if you don't configure that, they will not see this window. But that's not required, right? They can still do their work. They would still be able to see emails and the prospect notes as it stands today.
Great. Next question from Peter. What about the duplicate checks prior to inserting a new candidate record? What is the Bullhorn account used for the creation of the new candidate record?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what the system does is once you do an in-mail or a one-click export, it will use the data to find a candidate that already exists. So for instance, in my case, because I already exist, I can click yes, please share, and then it will say, oh, we already have Jord as a candidate within Salesforce, so we don't need to make a new one. We just add any details to this one. So for instance, let's say I did a one-click export instead, and I click the account manager job, I would simply get a job application on my existing Salesforce org. But for the one-click export, it will use first and last name to do a match, which can be a little troublesome because, of course, there were plenty of countries where there was a lot of duplicates in first and last name. So that's why emails, stub profiles are generally better because you have a little bit more data to work with to find that unique profile. In the case that it does find multiple records, so let's say I did a one-click export and my name is a bit more common than it actually is, and there is 5 Salesforce candidates with my name, it will pick the most recently updated one. If I do the in-mail one, it will try and find a match on the email, of course, so that will work a little better. The second part of that question, I think, is to what account do those actions use? That's actually why we retrieve those seed holders. So because we know which Salesforce user is a seed holder and what seed holder they are, we can assign actions to the right users. So for instance, here you'll see BullDev as the owner, which is the account on both sides that is a seed holder. Let's say Greta made a prospect note on me in Recruiter. Greta would be the owner of those prospect notes.
Great.
I think that answers it. Yeah.
I think so as well. So there's a question from Sarah here. Is there a plan to integrate search? The value would be in not having to leave the Salesforce window to use LinkedIn. I do believe that there is external search available right now, depending on which search system you're on. So am I correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? Because I didn't quite catch the question. Can you repeat it?
Is there a plan to integrate search so that you would not need to leave the Salesforce window in order to do a candidate search within LinkedIn?
At the moment, there are no such plans because it's not a feature that LinkedIn offers. So it's still 2 separate systems that you would both need and want to use, but we share a bit more information. The goal right now of the integration is not to completely replace the Recruiter interface. So I would not expect that anytime soon.
We have a question here to explain the consent process again. Do they request consent via LinkedIn or send an email through Bullhorn for Salesforce or push a button in Bullhorn for Salesforce?
Okay, yeah, great. I'll definitely let's walk through the consent piece one more time because it's a little complex and it's very important. So for this consent piece, I'm just going to assume you need to be fully GDPR compliant. So there is two ways, right? Let's start from the Salesforce side. If I want to sync candidates that I have in Salesforce and fetch their LinkedIn data, then I need to have this checkbox enabled, LinkedIn consent. How you want to do that is really up to how you want to set it up yourself. It's very configurable. What I would recommend is make this a part of your privacy policy. Somewhere in the process where you get these candidates, let's assume that they come from non-LinkedIn. So you've been in contact with them and you're reaching out to them directly, you've added them to Salesforce and you want their consent. You make it part of the privacy policy. Once they've accepted it, you make this a formula field that automatically says, I have a date on the privacy policy statement that they accepted it, so LinkedIn consent is given. That is the part where Salesforce is the starting point. Now, once LinkedIn is the starting point, LinkedIn takes care of the whole consent piece for you. So for the one-click export, consent is inherent to using the platform, so users can opt out of it. But for the one-click export, you don't need to take any other consent steps. For the email stub profile, it's taken care of by the screenshot. So again, you don't have to do anything. As soon as they accept the screen, you will have consent, and it will be a part of your Salesforce org as well. So just to summarize, consent from from Salesforce side, you can set that up however you please. You just need to fetch it somewhere, enable this checkbox, and tell and that's part of the configuration steps. You basically tell the integration, this checkbox means that the candidate has provided consent. If it's not checked, don't sync them. And on the LinkedIn side, it's taken care of by LinkedIn.
Great. Hopefully that clears it up. This is a really good question, Jordan. I think that we didn't even address this. Do you need to be on Lightning for this integration, or will it work in Classic for the three platforms?
Very good question. It will definitely work in Classic. The configuration steps are a little different, but the configuration documentation basically has this is what you need to do anyways. This is what you need to do for Lightning. This is what you need to do for Classic. I know maybe you're already in this process. There are some follow-up questions on the Classic specific pieces, so we're sorting that out. But yeah, definitely it works for both experiences in Salesforce.
Great. I have another question here from Peter. The question is about duplication. So in case a positive duplicate is found, which record gets updated? Is it the first one, the oldest one, or the most recent one, or is there some logic to that?
It's the most recently updated. So if there is a duplicate and it, like for instance with the one-click export, I'll take that example again. Let's say there are two Jords in my Salesforce org with the same last name, and I were to do a one-click export, I would not get email, right? I would not get phone number. I would only really get first, last name to work with. Now, let's say there are two records here. This one, I just made some changes. So this is the most recently updated one. It will assign any data from that one-click export into this profile. So it will pick the most recently updated one, not the oldest or newest one, the most recently updated or changed. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Here's one from Jen. Does the job you assign people to need to be one that you have posted to LinkedIn, or is that a job in your ATS?
It's a job in your ATS. So as part of the configuration, you will tell LinkedIn these are the fields of my jobs, and or even some way to customize it if you don't want all jobs to show up there. Basically, what it does, it fetches in the default, let's work with the default right now. As a default setup, it will fetch all the jobs that are open, so that are listed from Salesforce. So it doesn't matter if you posted them on LinkedIn or any other platform. It will just take the jobs that are in your Salesforce org that are open, that meet the criteria for open, and it will display those.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is from Kirk. If a user leaves our organization, will this product retain data they accumulated in Salesforce, or will it be deleted?
So if a user that works for them, that has a seat, leaves, will it retain their data? That's a new question for me, but give me a second. Yes, because the work that they done, it goes through their LinkedIn account, of course, but it goes through their LinkedIn account whilst working in your recruiter org. So if they were to send an email from their personal LinkedIn, it will of course never show up here. If they work from your recruiter org, it will show up here, and that data will be retained unless you choose to remove it.
Thank you. A question from Matt here. Will you send a recording of this presentation to all attendees? Absolutely, yes. We promise to, and we will. A question from Josh. Does Recruiter work alongside Navigator if someone has both licenses?
I'm not fully sure if I understand that question, because I really see no reason why it wouldn't. But if you're talking like, can you have both a Recruiter license and a Navigator license? I think the answer is yes, but that's more of a LinkedIn question. The integration just requires you to have a Recruiter license. So once you have that, there is no problem. If you can have Recruiter and Navigator, I'm pretty sure yes, but that's more of a question you would need to ask your LinkedIn representative.
Okay, next question is from Sarah. And the question is, when importing profiles from LinkedIn, does it track LinkedIn as a source automatically?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
When you import a profile from LinkedIn, will LinkedIn be marked as a source for that candidate in your ATS?
Yes, you will definitely. You'll definitely see the source of LinkedIn. You can even configure it in a way to assign it specific values that you want if it comes through there. So yeah, you can definitely find those records that are that came through LinkedIn.
Cool, thank you. A question here from Jen. Does a sync affect ownership of a candidate? Will the sync recognize that candidates have different owners?
Sync recognize that candidates have different owners. So I'm assuming we're talking about the record ownership here within Salesforce.
Correct.
So for new candidates, it will simply what it will do. So let's say Greta does a one-click export of me. Now Greta is a seat holder, and she is also a Salesforce user, and Salesforce knows that she is has a seat and which seat she has. So when she performs an action within Recruiter, it will create the candidate, it will create my profile, and it will assign her as the owner of it. So for instance, here you can see that this profile was originally created through a one-click export or an in-mail. I'm not sure if we've made the differentiation in this setup, but you can see that the account bulldev, which is Bullhorn developer, did it. So that's how the assignment will go.
Great. I have another question here from Jen about CCPA. Is there a different kind of consent for California residents, or is the GDPR consent kind of configurable in order for somebody to align to the CCPA?
Definitely the latter. So I've used GDPR a lot in my example. I'm a little new to CCPA, so I apologize that I didn't make the comparison there. But yeah, it's definitely in essence the same thing. So on LinkedIn side, they just take care of the consent piece. On your Salesforce side, you can just configure this checkbox to work with that whatever. So I'm assuming you have your process to get CCPA consent, and you can just use that to assign consent on the LinkedIn consent field as well. You don't even need to show it here if you don't want it to show up in your in here. You just want it on the background to be stored somewhere. You can do that absolutely. But yeah, it's basically the same thing for CCPA.
Awesome, good to know. Another question here around the email that you send to the candidates when you're first reaching out. If they reject sharing that information with the asker, what happens? Basically the question is, can you send it again, or is that sort of it?
That is sort of it. If they deny the consent, I would have to ask LinkedIn if there's like a reset period, so that if you send them an email like 2 years later, that it doesn't still say no, but it might say yes. I'm not really sure what the period there is, so we'll need to ask that to LinkedIn. But basically, once they say no, nothing will go to Salesforce because they've not consented to it.
And I think we have almost gotten through all of the questions, George, which is amazing. Thank you. But the last one that I see here is, do we have any timelines in terms of being able to disable the ATS export function?
I can't tell you. It's on LinkedIn side. Like, we cannot disable it from the Salesforce side, right? We're fully dependent on LinkedIn to bring that feature. I have already seen it. I don't know the timeline. I can ask LinkedIn. It might already be there for some of you. I honestly don't know. So let's make that part of the things that we circle back on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, one more before I let you go. Sorry. Is it possible
they can keep coming. We have some time.
We have 10 more minutes, so if there's any more questions, please do put them in the chat. Is it possible to configure a custom message for the consent piece? Question from Will.
A custom message for the consent piece. So I'm assuming you mean on this screen?
I do believe so.
Yeah, for this, no, this is just a standard LinkedIn piece, and if it would even be configurable, it would definitely be on the LinkedIn side. So we can propose it to them as a feature request, but as of right now, I do not believe this to be configurable. I'm fairly certain.
Right, from Sophie, not a question this time. Many thanks. This was really insightful, George. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, 50 minutes with this and all the Q&A. We're going to definitely send the recording to you and the slides as well. And as we discussed earlier, if you're interested, please do reach out to your account manager who will be able to provide more information. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day.
Bye.